Welcome to the GovComms podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from experts and thought leaders around the globe in government communication. Now, here is your host, David Pembroke.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to GovComms, the podcast that examines the practice of content communication in government and the public sector. My name's David Pembroke. Today, we speak to a big star in the world of government communications. Dr. Michelle Harrison is the global CEO of Kantar Public and the founding CEO of WPP Government and Public Sector Practice. She's responsible for the effectiveness of Kantar's public work around the world, and she supports the delivery of major projects. Michelle has worked with government and corporate clients in every continent across all aspects of public policy and public affairs. Her career has included time in academia, international development, strategy, marketing, and social research. She is a Davos speaker, a book author, and the founder of the WPP Executive Education Programmes in public communication and behaviour change. She has also led the establishment of WPP's Government Practice Hubs, which are in London, Brussels, Sydney, Beirut, Singapore, and Nairobi. And she joins me now from London. Very good morning to you, Michelle.
Good morning. Thank you. That's a very generous introduction.
You must spend a lot of time away from home doing all of that work.
Over the last 5 years, I've done a fair amount of travel, but it goes in spurts. You know, I'll go through a couple of months where I'm traveling a lot, and then a couple of months where I'm working out of London. Right now, I'm not leaving London all this week, so in fact, next couple of weeks. So that's great.
So, on your most recent trips, wherever you've been, what are the big issues that are burning a hole in government when it comes to public engagement, communications about programs, changing behaviours? What are the big issues that government are wrestling with in terms of building capability and effectiveness in the way that they speak with people?
Well, I think governments around the world are wrestling with similar problems, which is, I guess you could say, some of the biggest social challenges and public policy challenges of our time are connected to behaviour change. So it's about effectiveness. So whether we're looking at the environment, whether we're looking at getting people out to vote and democratic engagement, whether we're looking at whether or not people are paying their taxes online or not, whether it's about how we reduce the cost to serve in public services, and then how we increase the effectiveness of the taxpayers' money, they are the central issues that come to us. How to understand what it is that's a barrier to behaviour change, how to unlock that, and therefore how to deliver more effective public policy.
So in terms of that, what are the biggest challenges that government has in being effective in being able to drive behaviour change?
So, I mean, there are a number, because changing people's behaviour, especially at the whole population level, isn't easy. And when we look at the sort of global crisis of obesity amongst our young people around the world, we see what a challenge that can be. But in terms of really affecting behaviour change, what we tend to see is when things aren't working, it is likely to be that the key insights were wrong in the first place. So to really understand the way communications and campaign and media planning and creative execution will work, first of all, we need to understand what the levers are that really are likely to shift behaviour, the core insights. So the actual quality of the formative research for me is everything. If you haven't understood the things, the barriers to behaviour change, or the misunderstandings, or the challenges that people have in shifting their behaviours, if you haven't got to the heart of that, it doesn't matter how great your channel strategy is or how effective your creative execution is, it won't give you the impact that you want from a public policy point of view.
But would you say that government they spend an awful lot of money on research, but do you think that are they spending enough?
I think first of all we've got to give credit for the brilliant work that gets done, and in Australia and New Zealand you see governments doing incredibly effective research and communications, and we see that in other countries. We see that in the UK, we see that in the Netherlands, we increasingly see it around the world. So first of all, let's be clear about how over the last 10 years the sector has transformed itself in the understanding of how to apply behavioural insight and how to deliver that through communications. So I think my view normally is, yes, that the work is done as much as is possible to a high quality. I think that one of the things that we've set out to achieve with our executive education programs, which are now in their 6th year at we have a Masters of Public Policy module we teach at the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University, and we have an executive education program that we teach at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. So I think that if we look at that, one of the things that we try to support, which may seem quite strange coming ourselves from the commercial world, is how to help our clients actually commission as well as possible. And if you look at all of the different areas that form an integrated behaviour change programme from the government side, it includes media planning, media buying, all of the work that goes into creative strategy and then evaluation, all these different pieces. I think that what I hope is over the last few years, the understanding of how all of that should link together and how to get the best value out of the agencies that deliver this different type of work has increased, because I think how those different pieces fit together can be quite key in the effectiveness overall of delivering the public policy.
So what's the most effective way then to join up those particular elements of a research program and communications program?
It's have the people who are working on those different parts joined up to operate as a team as much as is possible. And I think, sometimes it can feel, I think, for our clients in governments that may be something of an inherent contradiction, because of the sense that the people who are doing the formative research or the creative execution need to have independent evaluation. So I do understand why clients will often not want the same group to be doing all of that work together. But I think that a different side to that is anyone who's working in these areas will have a passion, should have a passion, a strong passion for what they do and for the use of the tools that they've got to really deliver better public outcome. And so my experience has been that people from different agencies are always happy to get in a room together and operate like a team to get the best impact for the government agency that they're working for.
One of the things that has been a common theme on the podcast over the last 3 or 4 years that it's been running is the lack of teamwork, I suppose, between policymakers and the communications areas, where they're not seen as one function. They're seen very much separately. Do you see that as you travel around the world, that they're not as joined up as they need to be?
Well, certainly that was the inspiration really for setting up part of the inspiration for setting up the WPP government and public sector practice. But it was on both sides. So we would see that government communications specialists would be brought into an issue towards the end of what you might refer as the public policy cycle in governments, rather than at the beginning, that there was often a misunderstanding of how essential communications was as a lever for delivering public policy. So you'd see that on the side of the commissioning client, but then equally you would see that too in the agencies, that if you look at how an integrated cycle of communications delivery works, clients, not just in government but in the commercial sector too, what they want is for the different parts of agency life to join up: formative research, media planning and buying, creative evaluation, etc. So I think that this has been a problem on both sides. But if you really want everyone to get the best bang for their buck in terms of effective communications, we all know that this has got to be brought together. So I think that has been a long-term problem in government, where public policy has been made in isolation of the communication channel for delivering that and making it as effective as possible. But equally, I think on the agency side, the joining up wasn't good enough either. So that was our responsibility to get that sorted out.
So in terms of technology is clearly transforming every area of the way we live, the way we work, the way we play, the way we gather information, the way we send information. What sort of impact are, the growth of the big platforms, the increased speeds, the power and the speed with which information is now able to be moved around? How much of a challenge is that for the market researchers? Obviously, there's opportunity in it, but there certainly must be challenge. So how is that changing, and how can government harness the power of technology to gain better insights that lead to better public policy?
Yeah. So if we say, let's take the last 10 years and then the last 5 years, because the speed of change, I think we're just beginning to see the start of it in terms of what we would expect into the future. So, the proliferation of digital channels has transformed our ability to reach and understand people. So it's a tremendous asset, and it has also given us the opportunity to go much faster on so many things. Now, the flip side of that is two misunderstandings that are very common: that sometimes the technology itself is viewed as more than a tool to understand and deliver. It almost is viewed as the transformation, when it isn't. It's the infrastructure, it's the way in which we reach and understand, and what it never does is reduce the importance of the key insight into the depth of the social problem, or a wicked social problem, or the human issues that are preventing public policy being delivered. So it is a transformational agent to reach and understand people, but it doesn't give you the actual insight. It's not enough. The second thing is, and I think this is where we always do need to be very careful, but I think government clients are pretty sophisticated in this understanding. You have to be cautious that we don't create more groups that are actually left behind in all of this. The impact of technology is not even why it's transformation, it's not even. And so we always have to be very careful from a research point of view that the research practices we're following will be adequate for a whole population understanding. And, it means as the toolkit to do that has got bigger, so is the complexity of how we need to deliver that. So I think anyone who works in the sector has found this a pretty, in some ways, exhilarating journey to have these new tools at our advantage. But we do need to be cautious we don't create new groups of left behind people.
So how do you even it out as a researcher? How do you resist this wave of information and to gather those key foundational insights? How do you do that at a time where there's so much information?
Yeah, thank you. So, and this is an area obviously where the team in Kantar that focus on public policy spend a huge amount of time thinking. So I think where we've got to with this as our sector is we understand the difference between classical social research approaches, and some of these approaches have been with us for decades, and they're going to stay with us because they're incredibly effective. So that's everything from the way in which we create sampling frameworks and the way in which we talk to people. And, and just to be clear, we do as much in-home research face-to-face with participants now as we did 10 years ago around the world. So we still do as much as that, and I don't see a time when the ability to be inside someone's home and to build that relationship, and to actually build a relationship with some of our participants over the very long term if we're doing longitudinal work. I don't see a time when the power of human interaction, a face-to-face human interaction, is diminished. I think it remains absolutely key. So there are all kinds of classical techniques, ethnography, qualitative, everything that your listeners will be very familiar with. And we view them as classical approaches, and they remain absolutely core. And then we have a program that sits around that we refer to as our Frontiers program. And that's something that is constantly being updated, and it's looking at new techniques that may give us insights in particular groups. So a lot of the processes that have come on tap in the last 5 to 10 years, new neuroscience approaches or new digital technologies that allow us to reach people that might have been harder to reach. If they're going to help us get to better insight for our clients, then we're going to adopt them. Or we'll be having conversations with our clients about how this potentially might be helpful, but it's genuine innovation and it might not. And so we're very clear about the classical approaches and then the frontiers of innovation that we need to keep testing, and some of them will be transformative and some of them won't be. And that's okay. So we are looking for, with any new technique that arrives, our question becomes, does this provide the opportunity for a better insight somewhere, or does it provide an opportunity to deliver better public value? Does the new technology or new technique reduce the survey burden, for instance? So if we look at the work we're doing in Kantar on data science, with the way we're looking at everything from national statistics through to behaviour change programmes, the aim there is to say, can we reduce the survey burden on our participants? Other things that we already know so they don't need to be asked again, so that we can then focus our clients' budgets on different parts of that programme. So, I think it's a great moment, but we are always needing to be careful about techniques that are proven or just emerging, and some things may work and many might not. That's okay.
Are you seeing a great change in the skill sets that you need to have inside Kantar to deliver programs such as the Frontiers program?
It is iterative. I kind of view it as ongoing innovation. So it goes back to the people who have the gold standard classical research skill sets remain absolutely at the heart of what we do. And they are, of course, constantly extending their own skill sets too as new digital approaches emerge. And then, we're very lucky in Kantar because we have capability within the business, whether that's data analytics or whether that's the way in which we're applying machine learning. So I'm in my team, we're in a very fortunate position in that we get to draw down on Kantar's global skill set to apply it to our clients' problems. So we have colleagues who work in health, specialist capability and consulting, and we can put together the teams that are needed for a client-specific problem, but never reducing our emphasis on gold standard classical research approaches.
So if you were to sort of think back, and I'm sure obviously as the CEO of both Kantar Public and the WPP Government and Public Sector Practice, looking into the future, you mentioned just in an earlier answer that you just think that the change is only getting started. What does 5 years down the track look like? What are we going to see in terms of the way governments seek to gain insights, but not only seek to gain insights, but how do they achieve that behaviour change?
So I think maybe let's view that as the question being, is there likely to be a wholesale change in our approaches? I think that if we look at the techniques we use towards understanding behavioural insight, so getting to the core beliefs that people have and the barriers that can sometimes be put in place to unlock those behaviours. I think that those global public policy challenges, we can see them. New ones will emerge, but we understand the enormous challenges of inequality, of the environment, of public health, and then in the international development sphere where we work, of rapidly changing population growth in some of the countries where we work, and how to make sure that that's a dividend rather than putting more pressure on public services. So we understand those problems, and those problems are going to continue to be chipped away at by progressive public policies. So what I foresee, though, is technologies that we don't yet even know about rapidly changing our ability to learn, to get bigger data insights, and to come up with answers potentially faster through machine learning. So if I look at the last 5 years, it's been rapid in terms of the expansion of our skill set, and I think we would expect that or even more. And the skill set then amongst people who work in this sector, it's both having all of these classical and frontiers approaches, but also having a mindset as a practitioner that everything that comes along that might help us, we will grab and draw down on, because we're all working towards delivering a better public realm. We'll do what we can to make sure that happens.
You mentioned also in an earlier answer, the integrated approach, or the integrated team approach, by bringing media planning, media buying, creative and evaluation together. Where do you see that model evolving for governments, given that technology is transforming the way people consume media, and it's so much more fragmented now, where people can apply their attention? So how does that world where mainstream media, if I could call it that, where audiences are going elsewhere, how does then government deal with that when it's not as easy as just going and buying TV, buying radio, doing a bit of PR, and running the campaign for a discrete period of time?
Yeah. Well, anyone in our world, they know what kind of incredible shift has happened in recent years. And as I say, I think it's just getting started, and I think we're just beginning to understand the consequences of it. So, I'm sitting here from London this morning, and we have a team in London who are expert political pollsters, and I think we would, if you're looking at what might happen in the next few months in Britain, I think we would all agree it's the most dangerous white-collar job you currently be in, because of the transformation in politics, some of which has been influenced and shifted through social media. So we understand that one of the biggest challenges that government now has in communications is the channel proliferation and the shift in all kinds of issues to do with trust. So I think those things are pretty well understood amongst our client group. How does that get turned around by governments? I mean, this is an absolutely massive issue, and the WPP Government Practice over the last 3 to 4 years, we've been running a global research program with government communicators to specifically look at those issues, and what that's helped us understand is the commonality in the issues that our government communications experts and leaders feel around the world, with how to rebuild trust, how to reconnect with citizens. So that's an absolutely enormous challenge. It's almost like a paradigm shift in the world in which we operate. Now, the flip side of that is, with the proliferation of channels, we actually can also see we've got more ways to reach people at times. And then with the ability to integrate machine learning into the work that we're doing. What we do now have is the opportunity to understand from a campaign or a communications point of view whether or not something is working in a way that's much faster than it used to be. I mean, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, we'd be waiting for the research findings to come back from the field for us. Now you can understand it overnight whether or not something's landing well. So I don't think any of us doubt the seriousness of the transformation around the world in the relationship between citizens and government. From the point of view, though, of measuring campaign effectiveness, the ability to, I mean, I don't really like this phrase fail fast. I don't know why I don't like it, but because, no one wants to fail at all, do they? But to learn how to iteratively improve a communications campaign, that the digital transformation helps us do that.
So in terms of that research, which I would commend people to go and have a look at, that's the WPP Global Research into public sector communication issues. All they need to do is to go to the WPP Government Practice website and they'll be able to click through. It does have a bit of a despairing tone about it, though, doesn't it? And the most recent sort of research was all about, the problems that the research identified in the first case were there, and here are our issues. And then the latest research is like...
what we found was that people felt it got worse. So it's the leaders report. So, what we're doing is talking to hundreds of leaders in government communications and then distilling what they're telling us. So it's we're consolidating these viewpoints around core themes, and it doesn't make for easy reading because there's a huge amount of concern, and I think it's about where we are in this moment, both in terms of politics and economics. I mean, we have very good reason, don't we, at times to feel very concerned, and I think that comes through in the research findings, and we're very honest in that. But what I hope there's some inspiration in the way we talk about the techniques and tools that we have to communicate with people. And, anyone listening to this, we all believe in the power of communications. My colleague, Sean Larkins, who leads the Leaders Report, and he always says, governments can regulate and they can tax and they can legislate, or they can communicate. And let's remember the power of effective communications, and it's beholden on all of us to use this capability to do all we can to rebuild trust, because without it, we certainly won't be driving behaviour change.
Indeed. And I think probably the thing that strikes me with it as well is the massive opportunity and really the need for mindsets within government to continue to learn, to continue to change, to continue to be curious and continue to, embrace the change, because you can't stand against it. It's coming. So you really have to get your dancing shoes on.
Yeah, and let's also be inspired by the brilliant work that does get done. And that's the thing that's so easily missed. And some of it, I think, because we're so used to these areas of public policy, I think for some of us, the risk is it starts to feel humdrum when it isn't, because it touches people's lives and it's very noble work. And, if the work that is done on road safety, the work that is done across public health, Kantar was incredibly proud to work in Australia on the work on domestic violence, which, you can't look at that creative execution of that work and to understand the power of the research that went behind it without being moved. We have a team in India working on a long-term program with Gavi, the Global Alliance on Vaccination, which is using behavioural insight and communications to change the vaccination journey for children under 2. When I look at this work, when I actually get into the detail of the work that our teams are doing for their clients and the public policies they're addressing effectively, I can find it pretty moving. And that's the flip side to, what we're reading in the headlines every day and what we know we're being challenged by in terms of politics and global political shifts. I think, you get back into the campaign, you get back into the aim and delivery of government communications, and I think you can feel heartened again.
I completely agree. I can wholeheartedly agree, and I think that's certainly, part of this podcast is really about that, is to give people the encouragement about, they're doing important work and that it has real purpose, it has real mission, and as you say, if it can do something to improve the lives of people, then it's got to be a good reason to get out of bed every day. So, Michelle, thank you very much, and thank you very much for taking our call early in the morning. I'll let you go and get on with your
I'll go and get some more coffee inside of me.
Good luck, and I look forward to catching up with you again when you're next down under.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks to you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming back once again. What a great interview. What a very intelligent lady there, Dr. Michelle Harrison, running the work of Kantar Public globally, but also the CEO of WPP Government and Public Sector Practice. And if you haven't looked at that research, the Leaders Report, just whack it into your search engine and go and have a look at it, because it is great reading. It's a very, very important piece of fundamental research that really helps to give you some insights about what those common problems are around the world and what we need to do about some of them. So anyway, thanks to you for coming back. I'll be back at the same time in 2 weeks' time. But for the moment, it's bye for now.
You've been listening to the GovComms podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.